Welcome to the STARS program, seniors taking active roles in society. And now, here's your host, ANITA FINLEY.
The word suddenly alone is a little shocking, I must say, because we never think about that. I mean, people could be alone from divorce. They could be alone from losing their home. It could be a lot of things, but mostly for us anyway, it's because one of our spouses, our spouse has left us in some way. So I found this book called Suddenly Alone, and the other part of that is called A Practical Guide to Prepare Yourself and Your Loved Ones for When You Are Suddenly Alone. Of course, you're never going to be prepared, but when you read Ken and Donna Wright's book, it certainly will help you get prepared. So welcome to our show, both of you.
Thank you,
Thank
Anita.
you.
Good to be here.
Yeah, I was fascinated when you sent the book. And, of course, as I was going through it, usually when I go to see if we want to review a book, I go through it pretty quickly. Well, after, I guess, page 5 or 6, I just went slower and slower and said, this is magnificent with all these forms that people have no idea about. And it's probably frightening. Once they read it, they say, oh, my goodness, I don't have anything. So let's start with you, Ken. Let's say that, why don't you tell us a little bit about what you did before, because this is not what you did. This is your first book, correct?
So far, yes.
So far.
And maybe only.
Okay. So tell us what made you want to do this, what your preparation in your life has been.
Well, professionally, Don and I are not authors. We were both we're college grads, and we both worked for 30 years for IBM in New York. We started out on the technology side and then discovered you were better compensated as a commission salesman, so we became career salesmen. And Donna ended up handling pharmaceutical accounts, and I had Wall Street and the banks. We were able to retire early and move down to North Palm Beach, Florida, and life has been great ever since. But during that transition, especially when we got down to Florida, we noticed that a lot of the people at our church groups were talking about how when they were suddenly alone, they didn't know where stuff was. It's always in the drawer someplace, or men didn't know they had to put soap in the dishwasher for it to work, things like that. And nobody seemed to be doing anything about that. And we had this wonderful living trust set up by Joe Karp, who was just a phenomenal person and firm in Palm Beach Gardens. And we said, I think we could do something to help these folks. And we played on something in Donna's life, and if you don't mind, I'll let her tell that about the notebook which started all of this. Do you want to
Okay,
tell that
let's
story?
switch over now. We got him to talk, and now there's usually always a reason for something, isn't it?
Yes, I was the executrix of both my mother and my stepfather's estate, and my stepfather was a CPA. So when they were both in good health, he showed me his notebook, and he said, in this notebook, I have everything you need to look after your mother, my wife, if anything happens to me, because I pay the bills, I keep track of the investments, and he wanted me to know how to pick those things up if anything happened to him. So, of course, as a young person, it's hard to hear that when someone's telling you about dying, but I realized I kept track of exactly where he had the notebook and where all those files were, and so when the day came that he died relatively suddenly, I was prepared. And then shortly thereafter, my mother was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, and she wasn't able to pick up the responsibility that had been his. So I was always referring back to the notebook. I knew the right people to contact. I knew where their important documents were, and I knew the bills that needed to be paid to keep the house running until my mother was ready to go into a life care community. So that's the story behind it. And we thought, we better have one of these notebooks for ourselves. And then we realized, as we heard from other people in our church, both young and old, because you never know when you're going to lose a loved one in your family and how you might have to be the one that helps them to get their life, the remaining people in the family, back on track with their life.
Well, one thing you mentioned, Joe Karp, and actually, of course, Ken, he's been someone that I've been very close to he's probably our oldest advertiser, probably 20 some odd years, but he has been great too. And he provides you with a notebook, but not what you're talking about. But it's more than most lawyers do. And it gave me a lot of things. But what you got into was the down and dirty. I mean, I have to say that. It's like that's right. What were the last vaccinations that your mother or father had. So many things, so when they can't remember and they can't tell you. So many of these things now I'm faced with, even though I have been the financial person in our family. I handle all the bookkeeping, I handle everything. But that's even more frustrating for me now because my partner is recovering from a stroke, and I'm saying, oh, it's all on me. So I'm now trying to share this with our son. He doesn't know yet, but I'm going to have all this put together in a better way. I've had it in files, but it's not like a notebook like you talked about.
And thank you, Nita. That was our raison d'etre. We ran a seminar at our church maybe 5 years ago for starters. Everybody said, we could do something. So we prepared a notebook. This is right here. This is the notebook that we prepared with all the templates, and we gave a notebook to everybody that came pro bono.
Wow.
With sheet protectors to put the things in. And we had 100 people, 120 people, the first one, gave them the notebooks, put a lunch on for them. It ran 4 hours, and it was during the day, and everybody loved it.
Excuse me, you hadn't written your book at that point,
no,
had you?
we had not. And that's where we were back saying we could make a difference here somehow, not 1 or 10, not sure what the scale would be, but we could help. So then we heard more requests for the seminar. I said, no, we've hit the critical mass. I don't think there's any more out there than the 100 or so. But people said, we work during the day. What about at night? So we ran it on 2 nights again, had 150 show up. And what came out of this was it's not valuable just for the spouses. But we found as great an interest from the spouses that their children would have a roadmap, if you would, as to what's where, as Donna did with her notebook from her stepfather. You don't have to worry, did I miss something? So we gave those 2 seminars and gave it to Trinity of Episcopal Church in West Palm Beach for about 50 people down there, and that went over well. We've done 2 or 3 others around the county, Broward and Palm Beach County. Everybody said you ought to publish this.
So that's how this all came about, right?
But we had a very good friend who had published a book, and we went to her to see what her publisher was like, and Author House was the company, and they were good with us. I must say that. And what you see is the result. Now, the good news is there's 35 templates in that book. The bad news is there's 35 templates in that book. You got to do each one slowly at a time. It's going to take a while, but when you're done, and not every template applies to everybody, but a good majority of them will. And then you people that have now gotten the book have come back and gotten 3 or 4 to give to their kids, and then they fill out their templates and they say, "Here's our copy."
So I have to ask you, because you said something, Donna, that and is very true. I mean, I said it when my mother wanted to talk about going and picking out her final, the casket. And I said, don't talk to me about that, right? We all do that. But now I think we understand that has to get done. And so it's really part of the love gift you give to your children so that they don't know. For example, I have a son who is a very busy lawyer. His wife is in the partnership with him, is a very busy lawyer, and they have triplets who are 11. Now, can you picture this man? I can hardly get him on the phone, and now he's going to take care of what we have. He could, if it were in a notebook, it wouldn't be easy, but he could even get people to help him. But now to go through all the files, all the desks. So this is absolutely should win an Academy Award of books if there were one.
Thank you. The thing that drives us is not so much just getting everything organized in a book or a notebook with templates. There are certain critical documents, thanks to Joe Karp and the Living Trust they did for us, that handling that stage of life can be easier, it can be a nightmare. And if you're incapacitated and you don't have a will, DPOA, HIPAA, and all of that stuff, managing the assets of that person that's incapacitated is very expensive and requires lawyers. So, you really want to get those documents. And thanks to Joe Karp, and they know we've done this book, we reference them in the book, that those documents for estate planning, there's 5 key ones that are in the book. it's essential that those get created, especially your final directive. We've seen cases where people say, I don't want an open casket funeral and things like that. As soon as they die, the family says, oh, but we do, so they go and do what they want, right? And the courts will uphold a written directive. So that's where Joe was so influential for us, and we were so helpful to the people.
Yeah, that was good. I want to get back to you, Donna, though, on something, because I based on what Ken just said, I called we have a long-term health care policy. So I called them, and I have one and Bill has one. And I want to just find out what was needed if we're going to have to go that route. And they wanted to know where my financial legal document was that I could take care of him. And I know I have it because you're right, Joe Carp had it, but I didn't have it accessible where I was. So nothing would do, and I asked Joe for it, and of course it came by email. Now, my question is, are they going to accept the copy, or do they need an original? So see, that's something that you probably found over and over again. Tell us.
Yes, we recommend keeping the original with the lawyer, because I think that's the person that the family member should call immediately upon death or illness. And by having the original with the lawyer, they know how it should be handled appropriately. We recommend keeping a copy of the documents in the notebook so that family members know what to ask for when it's referred to in the notebook, that you should get a power of attorney or a healthcare directive power of attorney. It's important to know what to ask for, and that's why we say keep the originals with the lawyers, so that definitely the person who is the living survivor is talking to the lawyer.
So now, do you still have the notebook?
Oh, my stepfather's notebook?
Yes.
I do, actually, because I'm kind of a keeper.
And it's very sentimental, and the very things that you've done, and that it all worked out, didn't it? It sounds like it did.
It really did, because I think it's so important to know that you're honoring the wishes of the person that has passed on. I think those of us that survive, that's the one gift that we can give to our loved one when they pass on.
Well, now, one thing I was curious about, so you did the seminars, and I can imagine they came in droves, but you didn't charge. This was a gift to churches, I mean, I get that. So is this maybe a future for you?
Well, a variation of it. We're doing another class, if you don't mind a commercial.
Please.
February 18th?
Yes.
At First Pres Church in North Palm Beach. But because we have the book now rather than handouts of our PowerPoint presentation, the book
they should just buy the book.
$16.95 retail.
Right,
We'll
so
give
buy the book.
Buy the book, come to the seminar for free.
Of course.
And we'll give you, a brunch or something. And
of
so
course.
that's the way it is. And
smart.
And that's what we're doing. So, yes.
Yeah, so I was going to say, that's really smart. Now, this is the...
Yeah, the book at the seminar will only be $15.
Right.
So you
That's
save
right.
taxes, you save
yeah.
shipping. And
oh, yeah. And they have it all together.
Get a few bucks off.
Now, this is funny. I brought it, of course. I've had it at the rehab center, and I showed it to the nursing supervisor and someone else, and they said, oh, my gosh, we have got to order this. And one person said, could I have it and can I make copies? I said, I don't want you to take them out. I don't want you to take any of my pages out. So you ought to really buy this because, and so they will. But
Anita, I'm glad you brought that up. We don't want people ripping the pages out either. So what we've got, when you read the book, we mentioned 3 times in the book, we will send you free, if you buy the book, 1 per book purchased, an electronic version of the templates. We've got them on our computer at home. You email us at suddenlyalone3@gmail.com. Tell us where you bought the book and what your email address is, and we will email you an electronic copy. Supposedly, with Adobe, you can fill those in electronically. I'm still working that out. But at minimum, print that out, make a copy blank set for yourself, because you're going to change some, and then make sets for your kids as well. And we do that
You all
free.
are pretty good. You're quite generous, I must say. A lot of people, you definitely are not mercenary. I mean, you're certainly looking to pass along. It's called Pay It Forward, I believe. I think you had a very good life with IBM. As a matter of fact, I've lived in Boca. I lived here for a long time before we moved some other places. But I was with Arvida, and you know who Arvida was here.
I do.
And I had so many IBM, I've been moved, IBM people that I found homes for. And I loved IBM. I thought it was a real class act company, and I was so sorry to see that for some reason they didn't keep up. They should have been the head of everything, but that we don't go.
Technology changes, and the business.
I know.
IBM's been able to redefine itself several times, thank God. And Jenny Romney, the current chairman, is doing just a magnificent job up there with the long-term stuff that direction she's taken the business in. And any company that doesn't respond to change is not going to be around long. So
the other thing about IBM that I just loved is they really took care of their employees.
They did.
They did. You had lots of good things happening all the time, and I wished a lot of other companies had done that. But just be that what it may, I'm so happy that you were in a position to be able to not push this on people, but explain why it was so good. Come out with this book, and I heard this little, I don't use the word Twitter, but this little word that said, maybe you'll have another book. What would you possibly put in another book?
We don't have anything on our radar screen at the moment, so we have no idea either. But whatever God wants, you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans.
Isn't that true? But
one thing I would say about the book is besides the documents that we felt are very important from a legal standpoint, we also felt it's important not only to think about death and dying, but rather to lead a healthy lifestyle while we're still on this planet. So in the second half of the book, we have a section called Self-Care, where we describe things that one can do in their home and things they can do for themselves to make their life safer. Because so many accidents occur because of falling, when you have difficulty with balance, or if you haven't stopped to think of how you can make your home safe. So in the back section, if you're interested, I could just mention some of the things that we cover.
Please do that. I'm looking at that right now.
Okay. In the self-care section, we say the importance of getting things like 7 to 8 hours of sleep, following a healthy diet, making sure that you exercise, get out in the fresh air and take a deep breath. And one of the very important things, no matter what our age, is to be sure that we're adequately hydrated. There are many, many people, especially as we age, that think we don't want to drink that much water. But it's so important, and a very simple formula is to take your own body weight and divide it by 2. And that comes up with the number of ounces of water that you should drink during the day. And I think many of us fall short on that. But we found that in our church, many people were being rushed to the hospital because they were not hydrated properly, and they had to go on intravenous just to get the proper amount of fluids into their body. Another thing that we talk about in the self-care section is to have a balanced life. And one of those aspects is the finance side. Usually there's one member of a family that does the finances, writes the checks, maybe has a budget. So for those of us that haven't done a budget before, we thought it was important to put in a section on how to create a very simple budget by writing down what your income is, when it occurs, when those checks arrive, and also what your expenses are. And we suggested ways that you could simplify the process. We show a manual way, and we also suggest using an electronic way. Because now with our smartphones, I think of my smartphone as an extension of my memory. I have my contacts in it, I have my calendar in it, I have access to my financial institutions, and I have access to my investments. So in that very small device, I have an extension of my brain. My feeling being that if I learn to use this tool now, that if I would become impaired with my memory, I've become familiar with a habit. And that's just kind of like another thing about healthy living. If you get into the pattern of exercising daily and getting 7 to 8 hours of sleep at night and drinking lots of water, all that becomes a pattern. Now, getting back to your house, there's a lot of things if you look around in your house, and we included a checklist which we received from another source, which we document. And it says, go around your house and find out if you have any rugs that aren't fastened down, because that's an opportunity for someone who visits your home or someone in your family to slip and fall. We also suggest that you check your balance. And that's a simple thing to do. When you're pushing the cart in the supermarket, just try standing on one foot and having the handle of the supermarket cart right there to catch you if you did lose your balance. And you'll find that the time you're spending in line goes by very quickly, and you're learning to improve your balance by doing this a little bit each day. Another thing we talk about is the importance of documenting your daily activities, Because if someone's going to fill in for you when you might be incapacitated or you might be suffering from an injury from fall or some kind of an accident, if your activities are documented, then other people can help you out while you're currently not fully functional. And such examples would be, when do you normally go to the doctor? Who are your doctors? How do you contact them? And what is your medical history? I think we've all experienced that when we go to the doctor, the first thing they ask is, fill out the form. Well, what I do instead is I take this page from my notebook to the doctor's, which is a copy of the one that I have at home, and it has my medical history. It has the list of my doctors, and it has the list of my supplements and also any prescription drugs that I'm taking. Because again, why do we want to fill out these papers over and over when we could have it in an easy form? All we need to do is make a copy. Another thing we talk about is you look around at your house, there's a lot of things that maybe one of the members of the family is taking care of. Maybe that's the person that knows how to turn off the water when you leave for a long period of time, or the person that knows whether or not you use, if you have propane gas, or do you have gas coming in from the street, those types of things that are important to know in an emergency.
Circuit breakers.
Where the circuit breaker panel is in your garage is a frequent thing, and that's why Ken reminded me, because he's a ham radio operator, and quite often when he's on the radio, I experience that all of a sudden the room that I'm working in goes dark. So by checking my list, I know which circuit breaker panel to check and which circuit breaker itself is the one that's tripped, although I also know to look for the red symbol. That usually means that the panel button is in the opposite direction. But those kind of tools we thought would be helpful. Another thing that we included in this section besides the medical is, when do things need to be repaired? When do they need to be checked? When do you need to change the water filter? And another thing that we felt was important is, what are the contents of your wallet? It's such a devastating experience when you lose your wallet or you lose your handbag. If you have a copy, which we suggest, then you keep in your notebook, of all of your credit cards, all of your insurance cards, and any other important information that you want to be able to replace quickly, and the phone numbers are always on the back of those cards, you know exactly who to call.
Well, let me go back into what you said, though. This is interesting. So you have everything on your computer, on your iPhone, your smartphone. Is it all now on the cloud, that if you lost that, you'd have it all back?
That's correct. I think we're fortunate that there is now a way to have automatic backup of our computer systems. Many of us said, I know I should back it up, but we don't set aside time to do that. And fortunately, with the iCloud, the information does get uploaded to the iCloud without me having to take an action other than to say that I'm using it.
You know, you're such a wow person, because everything you were saying, as a gerontologist, I have been making speeches about people, all the things that you've said, not the forms so much, but I've been talking about how you live a healthy life. My husband and I, in 1992, wrote a book, Live to be 100 Plus. And we set out a lot of the very things that you're talking about. In fact, my husband even said, whenever you can sit in the back seat of a car, do it. I mean, he did a lot of things like this, but I want to really keep going with something. So let's say someone doesn't quite have the money to take care of that budget. I mean, they have a budget, and then something comes up, and all of a sudden they don't have the money. They need now to back down and either move or do other things, don't they? I mean, this shows them where they are, because most people, I would say, do not have budgets.
You're exactly right. And Ken and I are going to be married 50 years this year, and we've always said we should have a budget. Well, this year we have a budget, and you're absolutely right. We always knew that we were coming up short each month, but as luck would have it, you'd get some kind of a refund check or something that would save the day. So budgeting really is important, but we often get so busy with our daily lives, we don't set aside time to create a budget. So I do feel, as you do, that that's very important.
Right. Now, I have a budget for my business, for Boomer Times. I know how much I get in, how much I don't get in, and there are times I have to pull in from our own personal money to do that. But then I try to make it up. But it's a lot of switching things. But what you've said is really true. Once someone has some memory loss, they can't quite do all that. So you have to have somebody else on hand, knows what you're doing, and the notebook is really the key. I mean, I love the name The Notebook. Maybe it should be called, I don't think it should even be called Suddenly Alone. I think it should be called Your Notebook. It should be the Wright, and that's interesting, the Wright Notebook, except for to do WRIGHT,
Yes.
the Wright Notebook. You may want to start doing that because I think that's really,
Nicholas Sparks wrote the original Notebook, so we can't.
Who? What?
Nicholas Sparks wrote the original, quote, Notebook novel, the title.
Oh, yeah.
So,
I
so
understand
it'd have
that.
to be the right
So
notebook.
it could be the right notebook,
Right.
yeah, and that's really important. Well, let me get back actually to you, Ken. So you're making these speeches, and how do you do it? Like you're doing here, you talk a little, then you talk.
Yes, well, I do the first half on estate planning and the documents. Donna does the self-care.
On the humanity
and a
part.
section that she hasn't identified yet, which I think is really of extreme value to people in our area, on the different life care facilities around. Independent living, assisted living, nursing homes, memory care, and things like, and rehab. And Donna did a survey of all within 30-mile radius of North Palm Beach, went and visited each one to see which service they offered. And in our local handout, we have identified all of those and listed them. Now, for the book, we've nationalized it because
Sure.
it can't be local to Florida. But that's a good thing to have as
Yep.
well, to know what the differences are. And they're changing their roles as time goes on.
I know. I mean, now I've jumped into this. So let me say, we will be having you on another time for our radio show, as we said. We're going to have to say that's it for now, but it isn't it for now. I want everyone to buy this book, and the way they're going to buy it, tell us where they go again. I see what I have. Let me just make sure what I have is correct. They can go to Amazon.com and find the book, right?
Yes.
Or they can go directly to you, suddenlyalone3@gmail.com.
Yes, or they can go to buy it. They can go to as well authorhouse.com.
Okay. Thank
as well.
you.
That's the publisher.
It's really wonderful. We're very excited about your being here, and we'll see. And your book will be at the expo, as a matter of fact, also.
Oh, wonderful.
So thanks a lot. We'll be back.
Thanks, Anita.
Thank you.